All right. Well, I told you it'd probably get cut off, but I think it was because I got a phone call. You ever get those phone calls from numbers 1-800, 1-888 or things like that, and you have no clue who they are? And why would you want to know who they are? And why bother? Now, I get those. If I don't recognize a number, usually if it's important, I'll tag it so I'll know right off the bat who's calling. And that sometimes is always not always a good thing, because sometimes I'll miss out on something, but more often than not, whenever they're calling, it's at an appropriate time or when I don't really truly want to mess with the phone. So I have no idea who that was who cut me off. It looks like a number that's called me 3 or 4 times now over the last 2 days. I suspect it's an insurance fella trying to sell me, I don't know what they call it. Ever since I bought the house, the wife and I have been getting these offers from companies to insure the house in case of death or injury or something like that. And it's kind of suggested that it's going to be really cheap insurance. But to me, somehow or another, I don't know. It always sounds dodgy. So after talking to a few people, and then talking to a few people more, because it seemed like not everybody agreed with whether it was good or not, we decided to go talk to my insurance agent who covers the house insurance and my car insurance. And he told me that these things aren't necessarily as good as they portray, which might explain why you don't see the company letterhead on any of the envelopes or letters they send to you right away. It's like there's some big secret or something. And he says that you're better off just getting life insurance and going from there. So we looked at life insurance at my age at $150,000. It's $42 a month, which for some people is not a lot of money. It is a bit steep. I know that it's something we kind of need to have. I do. And then, of course, my wife. I mean, everybody's assuming, I guess, in some ways, I feel like people are rooting for me to croak first. I'm 4 years older than my wife. Yes, I'm overweight. But my grandfather and a lot of my relatives lived into their 90s, and they were overweight. I don't smoke. I drink moderately when I don't drink every day. I drink a couple times a month. And I'm just saying, right? I don't know. Anyhow. So we were cut off. Probably would have been cut off anyway, because like I said, that stretch I went through after the phone hung up was pretty hilly and deep ravines and kind of in the middle of nowhere. And a nice drive in the daylight. One of these days in the daylight, I'll do a video as I'm taking this leisurely travel, and when you can see what I see, or better even than what I see. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you're looking at me or the road, to be honest. I'm pretty sure I had that thing turned around. And I think, there we go. Not that it matters, it's so dark out here. You're just listening to my voice. There you have it. I've heard other people do voice messages or voice recordings. I haven't figured out how that works. Whether you can do it with YouTube or Facebook, or they're using some other medium. I'm sure there's a method. I just haven't really devoted a lot of time into looking into it. I kind of want to for things like this, because let's be honest, there's not a lot to see, especially with a cloud cover overhead. There's no moon, and there's no street lights out here. And we are definitely on a desolate stretch of county highway, and it will take me, 40 minutes, 45 minutes maybe, to reach where my next job is, my last one for the night. And then it's almost an hour drive back home from there. So I've still got 2-3 hours, almost nearly 3 hours ahead of me. So welcome to the Night Owl with Rick the Fat Man, Hilliard, your GM for the moment. And welcome to your place at the table. So, like I said, little Litita has been plagued with some very uncomfortable dreams to some degree. They're not vividly livid and not too pervy, but they are kind of, I don't know, soapboxy, soapy, right? I'm still feeling the ground out. I know taste and structure and what's acceptable, and sometimes it's hard to find that ground. I don't know what my players find as too much or too little. I don't know. I kind of got an idea by the guidelines of D&D Beyond what's acceptable and what's not. And yet you can do a lot of mature mindset stuff. You can do a lot of mature material and still be within the boundaries. We're not talking pornography here, but if you've read any of the Drow books, you'll know what I'm talking about. You can get quite in some of this stuff, and the innuendo can go a long way if it's cleverly packaged. We're not getting that. We're not getting there. Lita gets to the city, the market square for the laborers' quarter, and is standing out front of the Black Rose House of Healing when the silversmith comes to beat on the door, demanding to see his daughter, and she's having mixed emotions. She's terribly curious about what goes on inside that place and the place in general, especially since she's been warned several times to stay away from it. And there's a calling or a draw for her, and she's resisting this thing. And this was the player's take on this, not my take on this. So I'm rolling with it. And at the same time, she's feeling terribly guilty that she's breaking her promise to the druid, her mentor, for coming here in the first place. And my argument, or it's the way it plays out. She doesn't talk, but she has a lot of introspection, which you can do at the table. You can do this sort of stuff at the table in front of an audience, but sometimes one really seriously crack veteran have an audience that's potentially jeering and leering and chuckling and elbowing and so on and so forth. A game on the table can be rough, if impossible for a lot of players. Now, in a play-by-post, once again, like I said, you have a lot of freedom, literary freedom in a way, to coach your words and phrases and to rethink what you're going to say and how you say it. And then we have the opportunity to revise things. So I get he said, she said, and then we go back and look at it, the player and myself, and say, oh, can we take this at this angle, or can we add this or remove that because it doesn't work, or it's not conducive to what we're trying to achieve, which you can't do at a table. It just doesn't work, right? I'm just, pointing out the obvious in that scenario. So Lita listens to the silversmith, and the silversmith finally gets the attention of somebody inside, and this very beautiful, voluptuous, high-born lady called Melina answers the door, and she reminds the silversmith that the house of the Black Rose has rules, and one of its primary rules are that once a patient is submitted to the house for healing, whether it's for the day or it's for an indeterminate amount of time, they're not to have visitors under any circumstances whatsoever. Are anybody allowed to see them until they're ready to leave the house? And they're not going to be allowed contact. They're not going to be allowed, letters. They're totally cut off from everybody outside. And this is supposed to be conducive to their healing, both spiritual, mental, and physical. That's the rule of Lord Montegriff. I'm sorry I can't pronounce these things, even though they're words I'm using. And the silversmith is livid He's absolutely not happy with this. His daughter was in the hand, has only been in the hands for 3 days, and he wants to know how she's doing. It appeared that she had been at death's door when she was found. Now, a brief backstory for that character: Penillith or Penathith or Priscillith. That's Priscilla, mind you. There's a lot of I's and T's there. Thank you, Mediterranean language. The young woman in questions, in her 20s, was out on the town, so to speak, went shopping with a number of her well-born friends, or wealthy merchant class friends, a chaperone, and several of the house bodyguards, escorts, went around to a number of the upscale shops, purchasing items in preparation for the Silver Festival, which is coming in 2 weeks. The Festival of Silver, or the Silver Festival, is quite elaborate. It's one of the largest festivals for the city, and pretty much all the quarters throw some kind of hoopla, and it lasts for an entire week, which in my world is a 5 day. So for 5 days, everybody lets loose. And it's a big time, a big chance. This is one of the reasons the merchants in Libby's story were very concerned about what's going on, because there's a lot of opportunities for money to be made, especially in luxury items and dispensables. So the fact that that somehow or another the silversmith's daughter became separated from her group quite suddenly and disappeared, and the silversmith then basically turned loose a bunch of his associates and employees on the city to hunt her down. And eventually they found her wandering pretty much in a mindless state in very dangerous neighborhood, and where she was quite pale, quite, not unlike the young lady who visited Lita at her Barta wagon. So we've got some kind of thing going on in this city before a major festival is supposed to take place. So, and he wants to make sure she's okay. Well, now Lita has even more information about the Black House. She also, when she sees Melina, she has a moment of recollection of some kind of, not a flashback, but a connection. Not necessarily with the woman herself, but her mannerism, her dress, her style, her charisma. And somehow she's thinking that there's a connection somewhere in her past, but she has no idea what. And it's just one more thing that's puzzling her mind. That's kind of starting to eat at her. So she more or less flees the scene. She's not there for the balance of it when our half-elf Clark finishes her speech and rushes over to basically corral the silversmith and pepper him with a whole barrage of questions that she would like some answers to, and that's completely another storyline. So Lita returns to, or continues on her way to the Druid's House of Healing, is relieved to find that her mentor has gone out of the city for a few days. He's a Druid, he's an elder, he keeps a grove or something somewhere, not too far, awful far from somewhere out in the provinces, on the edges probably. This is his preferred home. And he often coaches these as I'm gathering herbs and what have you for medicinal purposes. And so it's the 6 months that she's tutored under Pensalot that she's gotten used to his particularities and this kind of thing, and she doesn't begrudge the Druid for this. Now, I'm sure somebody out there who may someday listen to this and go, wait a minute, now just out of, why is a sorceress tutoring under a druid? She's not going to be a druid. No, she's not. She has an innate ability. This makes her a sorceress. She's not a wizard. magic comes to her naturally. She's not Judaic. A druid is a form of a nature priest, and they get their power from nature and the gods and goddesses that represent nature in a lot of fantasy worlds. So he gets his power from that. So he's completely different school, completely different methodology, but they both share the healing trait. They're both healers. He's drawn to the city to heal the snow. Hey, what do you know? We briefly lost it and then it reconnected. It must have been that dip. Went down a pretty deep ravine back there and hit a bump, so who knows? So we don't care about Pensalot, the druid's backstory. He's a minor NPC. He's, going to play a big role anytime soon. Although who knows? We'll go. Various evil vapors and other things that bring the customers in, such as they are. And it's during this she's corralled by the elder. The elder whose family's in the carpenter's trade, trying to arrange a marriage, or at least a potential suitors meeting between Lita and one of her grandsons. And she's still aching. It's still running through her head about why is she's shamed that she allowed herself to even be briefly tempted by the house, the Black Rose, and its mysterious contents and people, because she'd made promises to Pensalot to stay the heck away from the place. And yet she also, from the previous night's encounter where she went to talk to you just missed a big old deer that just shot past the front of the truck. Another foot, and it would have been in the ditch. And that's that reconnection thing. We're on, like I said, a very long stretch of lonely road. 26 miles to town any significant size, to be truthful. I'm sure there's some little towns out here somewhere. I don't know where they're at, and I don't want to get off the road trying to find them. But these roads out here are notorious for deer. I've been lucky in 3 years. I've not hit a deer yet. I've never hit a deer in my life, to be truthful. I have not hit a deer. I've hit a lot of smaller animals, and it's not by design. I will try my level best not to run over something running across the street. But sometimes the possums and stuff they're stupid or slow, and I'm not going to risk my life or the equipment and go into a ditch. I'm just not. It would be a bad day if I'm not going to go into ditch. I'm sorry, but that would be a judgment call for a day I hope never, ever, ever, ever happens. So, anyway, speculative forward in storyline of the campaign for Lita's character. So, first off, she wants to follow up on the gown or the clothing. She wants to go visit the upscale the clothier. I mean, seamstresses usually make clothing from women. I mean, tailors can make clothing from women too. I guess there's no, Lord, I hope that. The only thing I always don't want to see is a cow real close to the road, because you never know if they're on the wrong side of the fence. And if a cow runs out in front of this thing, that might be a bad day for the trucking for me. And you'll be a front row seat in a very dark road, maybe you may or may not see the thing happen. Let's not ever let that happen. So, she wants to go follow up on the clothes. And then there's the segue for the other ongoing adventure with Mord and Elan and briefly Livy. And I'm trying to get to the point where all four of them are interacting together on a regular basis. So, the fact that Mord's the Hedera that Mord is escorting, and we'll have to get to his story if I got time, but we don't lose the connection here. He's going to get shot in the back by an arrow, and he's going to be in pretty bad shape. And as bounties go, he's only worth he needs to be alive. You need to hand him over alive, and barely alive might not cut it. There's a risk that he may not make it to the boat or to the city desk where you're supposed, depending on which direction that the character's taken. So if this NPC ends up dead, well then, they might have some other issues. And it's better for them as bounty hunters to actually turn this guy into somebody, so they either get some kudos from the city and the city officials, or they get some kudos from the underworld, the unofficial city officials of the city, for doing what they said. Because he's got two choices. He can turn him in for 35 crowns to the official, I guess the city guard, who, you can't turn him in to the ones in the damn bar, because they'll take the credit for him, and he won't get nothing. Or he can make sure Hedera makes it to the docks and gets on board the drunken crow and escapes the city, which, like I said, is a different story. So, being that she is known for taking and healing anybody who's in need, it's not unreasonable that either, if Moore hasn't heard of her, somebody he will encounter, or Hedera might direct him to her, because she has probably healed some nefarious types in the past, in the past few years, because she's been healing since she was an orphan on the healing house. She grew up in the healing house, and she has this natural innate ability via her sorceress bent, and has been working at it ever since. So there's a very good possibility. There's somehow or another we will weave that in there smoothly. So now we would have 2 of the 4 characters at least interacting directly. The other character, Elan, Elendil, however you want, Elan, I can't pronounce it. It's E-L-A-N and some other stuff. He is a little bit slow on his responses, so we'll see how this plays out. He may or may not be dialing in. Now, this is not for everybody. But 3 of the players seem to really have been really getting into the characters and really getting into the world building that they're helping participate in through their actions and their choices. So if the 3 of them get together, then it's just a matter of getting Livy involved. Now, pretty much as far as we've gone with Lita. Now this brings some conundrum, because the traditional, as you well know, the traditional adventure group or adventure group of players at the table, they live, breathe, and eat pretty much in each other's pocket. It just seems like that's the only time they ever go go their own way to pursue other things that are of interest to themselves is in downtime. So if a game is progressing far enough, and a player, the current adventure ends successfully or not so successfully, and the DM decides to declare, okay, there's a 6-month hiatus, or 6 weeks hiatus, or 6 years, whatever. Your characters have basically gone home or gone back to wherever it was your home was, or pursued other adventures, other events, or whatever, perhaps pursued additional training to justify your feats and level increases and magic, etc., what have you. But there's this moment of downtime at the table that literally can be no time whatsoever. I said this, now let's move on to the next adventure. In a play-by-post, especially if you're doing a story-driven, storyline-based, like I'm trying to pursue here, is the opportunity for these characters to interact with each other in an adventure mindset, at the same time still have responsibilities and to try to act on their own reconnaissance to some degree within the city. So does Livy give up her potential career in the government bureaucracy after only a few days to join the group? Or does Lita give up her healing practice and her potential eventual healing house of her own to join this group? Or do they pursue this adventures as they interact with each other as necessary and needed, and then split up and go their own ways, continuing this in their storyline. So it's not like there's some big blank. No, everybody's at the table. That's another thing that you can't do at the table that you can do with a play-by-post. Because we know that we're taking a day, or in this case, we have a 3-day window for responses, that you don't have a player sitting at the table while the other 3 players are busy doing something. That other player can be pursuing something in their private storyline, in the play-by-post, that can be even woven into the larger picture. The rules are pretty loose, or pretty flexible, if you will. So it's also possible. This fucking bright-ass light bastard. I hate those. Come on, get your damn headlights down, bastard. Can't see out the damn lights when you blind you. Excuse the French, my friends, but I don't like that. I almost drove into the medium over here because he's got these super high beams, and this old truck doesn't have anything like that. And he didn't even bother to turn them down. I flashed my lights at him numerous times, and he didn't bother to turn them down. And I almost drove into the medium because of him. And I'm not looking at this damn phone, so the phone is facing the street. So there's nothing for me to look at. So I'm talking, not gawking. I hate it. I have had problems with this before too. If I had my way, I'd have some serious high beam frickin' fog lights on this thing, and I'd flip a switch on and blind them with a wall of light. Grant you that's not the right mindset or attitude, blah, 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 but wishful thinking. So unless I'm willing to spend all the money to mount the things and pay for it myself, that ain't gonna happen. I'm struggling trying to get my boss to replace the one work light on the back of the truck that went out. For crimity's sake, you know how hard it is to work in the dark some days? I got one little headlamp. It just doesn't cut it. Anyway, the opportunities that play-by-post offer that you can't necessarily duplicate at the table very well. There's a lot of stuff, obviously, you're going to miss the interaction and the camaraderie of the people at your table that you don't have that in play-by-post. There's definitely some downsides to this format. But it's a matter of choice. So in the past, I have done very successful of where I've had one player pursue several storylines independently. So the same character is dealing with different things at different points in time. So potentially, while we're looking at this fictional downtime, or this non-active point in space where the characters have, in story, have broken up and went their own ways to do their own thing for a while before coming back together again to pursue the next adventure. And this kind of storyline is, if you've got the time and you've got a prolific player who's willing to do the work too, you can run 2 or 3 different storylines for the same character at different time settings and not have it overly problematic. It's doable. Now, like I said, one of my methods for this stuff is to do 2 or 3 things. So we're having all right, so when Livy is having a conversation with her, I don't want to call it her mentor, but her contact, who is this associate she has a little bit of backstory with, who hooked her up with the potential job in the city in the first place, who's actually an agent for the city's, the King's secret police. And she knows that this person has some connections to the higher levels of the city bureaucracy, but she's not she's not completely sure exactly what Belina does. Benina, yeah. Anyway, and so Livy has a conversation with her and asks questions. Or when she talks to the silversmith, we had 3 or 4 sentences and paragraphs of commentary and action interspaced with what in italics or in bold and brackets, your thoughts, your comments, your action. So what I'm doing is I'm not waiting for you line by line. I'm going to preempt you. This is what I said. When you read a book, the reason why a lot of people can read faster than others is not so much a comprehension or because they're just quicker at it. It's a comprehension thing. And what they mean in this aspect is you read enough stuff and you have read enough similar stuff. You have a general idea of what ought to follow a given scenario or a different city. So if they're having a conversation about a bad guy, it's possible to have 2 or 3 pieces of it at once and interspace it. So at this point, here's this, what do you think? Here's that, what do you say? Here's the answer to this, or here's a proposition to that, what is your response? And so you can get 3 or 4 different rounds worth of, or turns worth of action and verbal or what have you in there. It's the same with combat. I've told my players, I said, all right, when the scenarios come up, you can preempt this to some degree. You can make this assumption that if I throw this chair and assuming it hits the guy I'm aiming it at, I'm going to do this. Or this will be my follow-up move in these valleys and these rough roads, and we lose some of the contact. So we have this opportunity, to progress the storyline at a day's end. We've actually done 3 or 4 turns worth of stuff, and then we run a really steep hill, and I'm still getting to the top of it. And I know there's a number of even worse ones ahead. So I think I will call this at this point and probably pick up a 3rd one talking about the rest of Moore's story at some point. What do you think of that? All right, let me shut